now I would say my dream came true. I'd like to invite Mr. Forrest Breyfogle for a speech. Thank you for being here, and I'm sure that they will enjoy your workshop. Please. Thank you.
Get wired up here. Okay. Somebody used this the whole time? Okay. Thought they had the, I guess we're going to move my computer over here.
There is a lot of room for improvement. You have to use it.
I have to use it. The wireless doesn't work?
No, it doesn't work. Only
Okay. Okay, so I have to juggle things here. Anyway, we're going to be moving my computer over here so I can look at, just got to do some logistics here a little bit. Want to help me move the table here? Okay. Over here, it's because the cord's not long enough. Yeah, we're going to have to get close enough for power here. I'm going to run out of battery. Hopefully my clicker's going to be closer here, and now if I can keep my computer from falling over. All this FMEA stuff, risk assessments, I think if... Murphy, do you have Murphy over here? Yeah, yes. Murphy's everywhere. Seem like I run into him a lot. I tried to plug in over here with my iPad, and all of a sudden we saw smoke over in the corner over here. So we said, well, let's try plan B and C and so on. Let's see. Ah, wonderful, that works. Let's see if I got my over here. I got a lot of hands here. Can you see me from down here, or should I be on the stage? Does this work okay? Okay, super. I always like to roam around a little bit, and I like to also see my screen so I'm not looking up there all the time. So anyway, it makes a little bit of challenges here. I really appreciate the introduction by Constant. It was really nice of him. I didn't really know I made a difference. Sometimes all of a sudden you'll get another part of the world and you really positively affected some people. And that gives you goosebumps. It makes you feel a lot better, you know, about it. Because sometimes you say, is anybody listening to what I'm saying? Because I worked at like 24 years at IBM, so it was good to see IBM here. I took a bridge of retirement in '92 and founded Smarter Solutions. I didn't know what I was getting in for. You know, I had the best job at world at IBM. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, but I took design of experiment class in '75, and it basically changed my life. I started applying a lot of statistical techniques within IBM, and I moved from development to the product test area, and I applied the techniques there. And then I approached my management that I wanted to do internal statistical consultant full-time. And they bought into that. So from 1980 to 92, I was an internal consultant within IBM. I found my own work. I was not assigned a project in 12 years. I found most of my work in the coffee machine, at the coffee machines. But, over that time, I had a great statistician mentor. And I looked at the world differently than most people did. It was a very pragmatic way of doing it, and I started building a philosophy. And one of the things I noted is often people ask the wrong question. You know, and that still happens a lot of times. I just had a call the other day, and somebody said, well, we want to do a certain kind of testing. And I said, well, what do you really want to do? And I really scoped completely what they were trying to do. And so I think that happens a lot of times. And I think it also happens a lot of times in business. We tend to ask the wrong questions, or we get caught in paradigms. And so that's one thing I'm going to be talking about with things that Donald brought up here. He made some very good points about the business processes. You know, but the point is, where do you actually start? How do you hook all those things together? Stefan brought some really good points up about the IT. The problems you can get a lot of times is it gets into silos. And how do you affect the big picture? Because I think that with all the economic problems that we've had, it seems kind of strange to me that nobody's challenging our business system of how we actually do things. That, to me, is rather antiquated on how we're doing things. And what I'm going to present to you is a paradigm shift on how we're actually looking at the business. So there are a lot of things that were brought up in the previous presentations, like everybody knows we need to make improvements, right? Everybody agrees on that. And the thing is, we also need to address risk assessments, right? We need to improve the financials for profit organizations, and so we need to do all these good things that they were talked about, but how do we actually do it? How do we hook it together? And to me, that's one of the big challenges that we've had, is process improvement efforts really tend to be siloed. They don't tend to be hooked together with an overall business system. And so one of the two fundamental things I'm going to be challenging that I think that a lot of groups use is one of strategies. Strategies is often created as step one. We tend to align to strategies, but a lot of times those strategies are worded like, I want to be the best of the best. And then we're going to cascade those throughout the organization. So I'm going to be challenged that paradigm. The other thing I'm going to be challenging is red, yellow, green scorecards. Now, those are very popular in the IT software especially, and they sound really good, but I'm actually going to challenge those to be more aligned with, as I saw his picture up here, Edwards Deming. Because if you're familiar with Dr. Edwards Deming, he has a red bead experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's talking about we react basically to all the ups and downs as though they're unusual events. And we don't really go in and looking at it as a process. And that's what I'm suggesting the red, yellow, green scorecards do. That's not good. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. So we're going to be going in and covering a lot of ground here, but I would like for you to all raise your hand and say, raise your hand. A hand goes up. I promise to ask Forrest a question if I do not understand something. Is that fair? Okay, good. I've got an infinite amount of patience for questions, but I get very frustrated at the end when I see an evaluation form that gave me a bad rating because they didn't understand. To me, that was not fair, and they did not bring it up. Okay, now you all swore you agreed, okay? So you're not going to be in that situation, right? Okay, good. So let's go in. Now, to me, what I think we need to do something fundamentally different with the business. And what I call this overall business system, integrated enterprise excellence. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, first thing I'm going to be doing is going to be summarizing the issues with the current business management system. So I think that there's some problems, and we're going to have some breakout sessions here. So we got a lot of different teams. The teams will be at the tables here. And we're going to be talking about some of these issues here. And then I'm going to go in and elaborate a little bit more about these process improvement efforts. Because fundamentally, I don't think they work the way we're doing it right now. But I agree with the statements earlier that we need to make an improvement. But I'm suggesting TQM, or Total Quality Management. You had quality circles, you had Lean Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen events, and so on. I'm suggesting the way we're approaching it doesn't work, even though we really need it, because they often get into silos. We're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to be talking about a different way of looking at scorecards. Because as I alluded to earlier, I said red, yellow, green scorecards, I believe, have some issues. And what I'd like to do is create a scorecard that looks out the windshield of the car. It's a predictive scorecard, and if we don't like what we see, we need to do something fundamentally different. So we're going to look at scorecards completely different than the way they're traditionally done. And then what I'll be talking about is how to put together this overall scorecards and all these different pieces that we talked about into an overall business system. So what I'm going to be focusing on here is a methodology that's really documented in a 5-book series that's put together, and I've got them over here. You're going to be, many of you will be receiving the volume 2 later. I had planned to make references to that, which I'll still do, but you're not going to obviously be able to open the book to actually do this. But you'll have the presentation here, basically, and then we can you can look at those at another point in time. But there's also other references to the other books that I'll make, and if you're so inclined, you can look at those later. Now, one of the books, Volume 2, deals with the overall business system. And then Volume 3 is basically a book that's a black belt or a master black belt roadmap for actually doing process improvement. So that's like over 1,100 pages, but it gets very detailed on how you do it. It's an extension of what Constance was talking about earlier, was implementing Six Sigma. And it truly integrates Lean and Six Sigma. And then there's an 8.5 by 11 book. It's a memory jogger. It doesn't really quite fit in your pocket, but it stipulates the methodology for doing process improvement. Because what I think what's missing a lot of times in Lean Six Sigma training is a book that can be referenced long after the training, the roadmap of hooking things together. And then the Volume 1 is written as a novel, has been compared to the goal, and that describes the benefits of this integrated enterprise excellence system. And then there's another paperback, or it can be available from our website as a free ebook, where it describes the benefit of this approach versus red, yellow, green scorecards, and the balanced scorecard's got issues, and Hoshin planning's got issues. And, I'm describing a lot of things got issues to it. So what I'd like for you to do now is, rather than me just read this, is I would like for you to go in and pick out a high point. I'm going to be having several slides here, and then we're going to have an exercise. I'm going to be talking about several different ways of making or running your business. And one of the popular approaches has been management by objectives. And I just basically took some things from Wikipedia to describe that. And I'd like for you to come back and tell me what you think is one of the high points of this methodology, or one of the main points. Firefighting, okay. Management by objective that can lead to firefighting, or you got any other points?
The difficulty to involve the employee in setting objectives and undertake them.
Okay. Anything else? So what here you're basically trying to do is setting objectives, and I want you to go out and do good, right? But how do you know those objectives are right for the business as a whole? Do you think that if you had 2 different managers, you might have a different set of objectives? You think that's possible? Yeah. It's possible. I think we agree to that. And often those objectives are not based upon analytics, right? They may be based upon opinions. There may be some informal or ad hoc, analysis behind it, but it's not it. But this has been a very popular approach. Basically, this is not unlike red, yellow, green scorecards. We're based a lot on this, because we set objectives, and then if you meet those objectives, it's green, but if you don't, it's red. But it can, like he was talking about too, is firefighting common cause problems as though they're special cause. What about this one?
Neglect the content.
Neglect the content? Okay. You lose direction? Yes. So you're reacting to problems that you have, but are we answering the right question? Is that fair? What about this one? Have you heard of this? Yes? This is not a bad thing, right? Because a lot of times management executives may be getting into an ivory tower and they don't know what's really happening. But do you think if you just had management by wandering around that you could have a good business?
It's just a vision.
It's a vision. But the thing is, it may not, I think it's a good thing, but we need to have more of a structure than that. Like you're talking about earlier, some of these things become philosophies, but we really want to create a structure that it leads to these things. And we want to go in and pull them all together. What about the quality management system?
It's a good framework if you want to live it.
Yeah, you're talking about a good framework if you want to live it. It's based upon a lot of things, and I pulled this from Wikipedia, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but they're aligning with the ISO, ISO 9000. Because one thing about ISO, you're laying out all the processes, but are you actually doing it? Are the best processes done? Are you really structurally pulling together an improvement system? Maybe not as well as you might think. A lot of times people go through ISO just to get the certification. Is that fair? Okay. Okay, what about total quality management?
Never applied.
Say it's never applied? Okay, I think philosophically it's not a bad thing, but the thing is we don't necessarily have the structure a lot of times to achieve this. Okay, this is one Donald was talking about here, was business process management, or BPM. So again, this pulled from Wikipedia. Now when you start really looking into it, it seems like there's two different philosophies on this. A lot of it times it gets to be like you were talking about IT solutions, and then you got the other people that are dealing with the business processes. I was talking to one of our customers that I work with a lot, that's an international company, does Lean Six Sigma, and she uses our materials when training throughout the world. She was saying that, and I was saying to her that we're moving a lot more to business process management, and she's saying that it's gotten actually a bad name in their company because the way they're implemented is just documenting processes. Okay, and well, obviously that's not the right thing to do either. But I think that this has some good aspects to it, but when you really start looking at the internet, it doesn't have as much structure as I think it really should, in my opinion. So what we're really trying to do here is integrate the process improvement efforts like Lean Six Sigma with actually business process management, but all the components that they're talking about with that. Okay, so what we're going to do is now you're each around a table here, so we'll call that that's your team here, okay? And what I'm going to do is have you work as a team for a list of business management systems that your organizations are using. I gave you some examples. You may have some other ones that you're actually using. And I'd like for you to go in and list the positives and negatives of the systems that you have. Okay, you might want to have one person be the scribe or the secretary for your particular team, and we're going to use a hospital as an example. Now, I understand you have a lot better hospital system than we do in the United States, but we'll go in and we tend to work on the chaos mode on that, and everybody's got a different opinion about that, but we're not going to go down that path today. So we're going to continue, got a new position there, and you're the Director of Business Operations Systems and Improvement. So you report to the CEO, okay? So that's what your team is, and we're going to have you take that position. And the reason I'm doing this is I don't know what position you have in the organization, but some people will go in and listen to what I say, and they'll go in and say, well, Forrest, that's great, but you really need to be talking to my boss's boss. So they're going to say, my position is not of great influence to make and incorporate what you're talking about. But for the purpose of today, you're the boss, or very close to the boss. So whatever you guys decide is going to happen. And then later at this session, if you agree with what we're talking about, we'll talk about ways that you could shrink the change to actually start implementing it in your organization. So is that fair? So don't go in and say, this is not possible right now. You're the boss, basically, and you can do anything you want to as a team, okay? So, so your team is to improve the hospital's operations. So what improvement projects will you actually take on? And what else should be undertaken? So that's what I'd like for you to do in the next few minutes. We don't have a lot of time for this, so you're going to have to work at it very efficiently in your group. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and we'll start a discussion about what each of your, well, maybe not every team, but what basically was the general opinion that came from this exercise. Okay, is there any questions? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Yes. Oh, excuse me.
Personally, I don't know anything about hospitals.
Okay, well, no, she said, I don't know anything about a hospital, but just go in and say what do you think might be, or maybe just talk as a team here, you know, far as, like, for example, you might even think that, hey, just, you know, it takes, I have to wait in the waiting room too long. I know you're not going to come out with the best answer here, but that's part of it. And what we're going to do is try to do a better job later, okay? It's a good point. And just go in and try to make it, if a hospital doesn't work for you, you know, change it to another process of business. I don't care, okay? We're going to do like 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah. Half an hour. Okay. So we can announce them that they will work 15 minutes and then we take the break.
Okay. Okay, we'll work for like 15 minutes and then we'll take a break and then we'll discuss this at 11:15. So, you know, like a half an hour break, right? Everybody got that? So you'll take like 10 or 15 minutes working on the exercise. Then at 10:45 to 11:15 will be the break. Okay? And we'll discuss your report out at 11:15.
good discussion? Oh, good, okay. That's a good discussion. So what business systems are you guys people have metrics that they have, or is it one of those systems that I just talked about? Can you relate to any of those? Well, I was just only suggesting the hospital would be, what would you include if you had a hospital? You might say waiting time in emergency. Okay? Just, if you had or know somebody, it took too long to start the process. So don't get too hung up on top of details. What I'm going to really look at later is how you fix the hospital, figure out where you can improve. Right now, the system relates mostly to your situation.
We have to go to the issue what this is 30 hospitals involved delays, but just again a systematic way how
Okay, I want to make sure that the first bullet, the major bullet, I'm asking about your systems that you're having in your company. The other one is dealing with the hospital. If you don't know much about the hospital, don't get too hung up on it, because I'm going to be going in and talking about a little bit later how we can analyze it and figure out where we should focus our improvements. You might think, for example, in the hospital, it takes too long to start the procedure. I have to be on a waiting list. Something like that. Don't make it too complicated. But the first bullet is dealing with your current business systems that you have or what you think your management is incorporating it throughout the company, okay? Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. You should be wrapping this up in about 3 more minutes, and then you could take your half an hour break.
Pentru a crește puțin interactivitatea, întrebările pe care le veți pune de acum înainte pot fi în limba română. Forrest oricum are traducere simultană, da?
Și,
deci se pot pune...
Și rugămintea noastră este să ridicați mâna ca să aducem un microfon. Bine? Când vreți să puneți o întrebare. Este și înregistrat și dacă vorbiți prea încet nu se aude.
Și comentariile le puteți face în limba română, deci nu e absolut niciun fel de problemă. Adică n-am vrea să nu existe interactivitate doar din cauza barierei de limbă. E ok?
What were the thoughts that you had about typical business systems that your teams had encountered or what's getting used in your organization? Okay, oh, that's right, thank you. I think the rules are in Romanian. Because they say you talk more if it's that way. Needs a microphone? So I gotta make sure my translators are on here. Okay.
Ok. Mă numesc Cristian Bleotu, sunt consultant. Ca urmare, am luat în considerare ultima organizație în care am lucrat, o organizație din industria automotive. În această organizație, sistemul utilizat era de tip Lean Manufacturing. Ca urmare, am descris punctele bune și punctele mai puțin bune ale acestui sistem. Ca și puncte pozitive, permite participarea întregii organizații la efortul de îmbunătățire continuă, pentru că este implementat de la nivel de CEO până la nivel de operator. Alt punct, încorporează Business Process Management pentru că obiectivele sunt identificate și sunt cascadate până la nivel de operator. Asigură transparența, stimulează îmbunătățirea continuă, motivează personalul, ar fi câteva doar dintre avantaje. Permițând practic în acest fel organizației să se adapteze permanent la schimbările de pe piață și să rămână competitiv. La partea de dezavantaje am menționat un singur punct care este de fapt critic și cred că este probabil în orice altă inițiativă de îmbunătățire continuă, și anume, de îndată ce managementul își pierde interesul și încrederea în sistem, întreaga organizație practic își va pierde și ea încrederea în acest sistem și rămâne ceva decât de fațadă, adică grafice afișate, ședință de formă și, bineînțeles, fără performanțe. Atât.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I think the point that he was making relative to Lean Six Sigma is common. It often depends upon the leader, and if they change, then the thing is that whole deployment can lose focus, and it may actually get disbanded. So this should work off the wireless, is it? Is this not working off the wireless? It's working off the wireless? Okay. Okay, so so that's one of the challenges I've seen with Lean Six Sigma. All of a sudden they'll end up losing interest. But the other point is, I don't believe Lean Six Sigma is a business system either. It doesn't go in and involve creating strategies. It doesn't really look at scorecards. It's got some very powerful techniques where you're working on improvements, but the thing is, often those can get to be siloed. I had a conversation, at break, talking about theory constraints being so important. And I agree with you, because a lot of times we don't do improvement projects that are in the bottleneck. So we need to put that, and I agree with the positive aspects of Lean Six Sigma, but we really want to go in and hook it together with an overall business system. So is there somebody else that would like to share their thoughts? Maybe one more? Nobody? Oh, good. Okay.
Hello. My name is Claudia. We make a short analysis about the hospital. We think it is necessary to make a cost analysis and optimization with a balanced scorecard method. We want to make a market research about customer satisfaction and their real needs, because if we want to sell a product and we want our client to be satisfied, we must to know their needs. After processing the result, we must create a strategy for improve the services. Our services must be based on real cost of the services and not overestimated. On the same time, an important resource for the hospital is human resources. And for that we must make an evaluation. I think the evaluation must be taken 1-2 times of the year. And we must encourage to improve their skills. And also a big problem for medical public system are public acquisition. And for this segment, we think that we must make a strategy for spend the money with wisdom, yes.
Okay.
And I think my colleagues, Julian, want to speak. Julian, please.
Okay.
You're the speaker. Hello. Specific projects we'd like to set and get approved are procurement cost reduction by 30% in 1 year. Then basic operational cost setup in 6 months, and customer in lead time reduction by 50% in 6 months.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Alexandru Bădescu. I'm working with Eneria. It's a Caterpillar Power Systems dealer in Romania. Forrest, I wouldn't like to lose your point here in your presentation. And I have only 2 things to add. Between management by objective, by exception, or working around, none of them is wrong for me. None of them is the best. You can adapt your management style considering what your company is doing. For instance, if you have a five-person company, it's easier to walk around to look what the 5 persons are doing. If you have a big company, for instance, an automotive company producing or etc., there you have to use other type of managements. But about the hospital, I am in a company of very clever and nice ladies here, and we all agreed that what is the hospital done for? It's to get in some customers, well, patients in this case, give them some service, and at the end take the money. Well, from the customer or from the insurance company, whatever. So in order to improve that hospital, which apparently is going to go bankrupt because he's losing customers and has too high costs, you have to look what is happening since the first moment when the customer is entering in the hospital, and how joyful he is when he's paying the bill at the end, or the insurance company. There is the problem. The process in between is the most important, which is defining the customer satisfaction, and we define here some situations, and the costs also. Both of them has to be measured. This is the starting point. What is the customer satisfaction? Where are the costs you think are too high for the functioning of that hospital? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll take one more. Okay, no.
Mersi. Pe mine m-a frapat remarca dumneavoastră referitoare la a pune corect întrebarea. Care e întrebarea pe care trebuie să o punem și să o punem corect. Și în momentul în care am citit sarcina care ni s-a dat, obiectivul să îmbunătățim nivelul de calitate a operării spitalului, mi-am pus implicit întrebarea care este întrebarea corectă. Și noi ne-am gândit că acest răspuns la întrebare îl vom găsi împreună cu directorul de operațiuni, directorul general, pentru ca să aliniem împreună cu el și cu bordul de administrație înțelegerea corectă a ce înseamnă o operare corectă din perspectiva așteptărilor bordului de administrație și a directorului general. Și în momentul în care vom fi înțeles așteptările lor de la noi ca director de operațiuni, bineînțeles că vom merge pe elementele care determină aceste rezultate așteptate și cu siguranță ne vom uita la satisfacția clienților, probabil că ne vom uita la modul de descriere al pachetului de servicii medicale și al relației lui cu sistemele de operare în cadrul companiei. Vom vedea în ce măsură știm să ținem costul sub control și vom identifica toate zonele de scurgere a costurilor și de scurgere a gradului de satisfacție al angajatului și al clientului extern. În măsura în care toate aceste lucruri le vom clarifica, probabil că în final ne gândeam noi să introducem și un sistem de ERP pentru a putea să genereze date și informații care să ne susțină ulterior deciziile în operare. Cam la asta ne-am gândit noi, o aliniere între interpretarea cuvântului operațiune eficientă din perspectiva bordului, a directorului general și ulterior noi să știm ce avem de făcut.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. A lot of the comments that you made were kind of getting ahead because I think what I was really trying to do with this exercise is basically set the stage so that we can start going in and saying maybe there's some issues with the current way that we're actually running the business and doing process improvement projects. You know, because a lot of times we're not doing the analysis that you guys were talking about. All of a sudden, we might go in and just start executing projects. Now, the point that you just made relative to what the board wants and the executives wants, you know, I think we got to be careful with that a little bit because sometimes that's not based upon the analytics. I would like to go in and actually get to the point that we impact how the board looks at the numbers and how they put together the analytics. Because a lot of times with Lean Six Sigma, the CEO and the executives didn't change how they looked at numbers. What I'm suggesting, if you take the whole, we call it big enchilada, the big picture here, if you take that whole thing, they're going to look at numbers differently and making a better decision in my mind based upon analytics because so often now they're not based upon analytics, they're based upon opinion, which may be correct or may not be correct. Okay, oops. Okay, so we talked about little improvement projects already. So now what else should be done within management of the hospital? And I think the IBM was Dave was talking about, or Don was talking about, was an important point. How do you go in and have the day-to-day management included in there? You know, and so that to me is also a very important point that we'd like to have within BPM. Now, if you're going in and start looking at a process improvement effort, and I think this is the point that you were making earlier with about Lean Six Sigma, it can often go in and stall out. And so if you have a change in leadership, then maybe you don't have a Lean Six Sigma program because they want to implement something else, or that's not something they believe in. Okay, so typically with process improvement programs like Lean Six Sigma, what often happens is that the projects that you're working on is created from a list that the executive thinks that are important. Is that fair? Okay. Now, I call this a push for project creation. So we're saying we need to do some process improvement efforts, so now let's figure out where we should focus our efforts. If you're doing Lean Six Sigma training, a lot of times what will happen is we're starting a Lean Six Sigma wave next week, and we need some projects for people to work on. Well, often these projects are not necessarily the projects that are important to the business as a whole. And often what happens is the process improvement owners are not asking for the projects to get done. So what's wrong with that picture? You know? And often what happens is they tend to fall off people's plates. Believe that that's a possibility? For those who have done Lean Six Sigma, have you seen all of a sudden it lose interest and more important or pressing things have occurred? At least I've seen that in a lot of organizations. Have you seen some, so you may have TQM or other means of actually using project selection, but I think we have some of the same type of issues. They often get to the point that they're silos and they don't impact the big picture, and then after a few years, then executives may lose interest. So what we'd really like to do is choose the major projects so that positively impacts the enterprise as a whole. So in order to do that, what I'm suggesting is we actually need to go in and create a different way we do scorecards. We need to look at a predictive scorecarding system so that if we don't like what we see when we look out the windshield of a car, that's the prediction point, we either turn the steering wheel or apply the brakes. That would be an analogy of a process improvement project. But often what happens when we tend to manage the organization as a whole, we tend to go in and drive by looking only at the rear view mirror. We look at metrics that are history, they're not predictive. And that, as you know, is a rather hazardous way of driving a vehicle. So what I'm suggesting, we need to have a system that leads to what I call the 3 R's of business. That is, everybody doing the right things, doing them right, at the right time. And that system I'm suggesting is integrated enterprise excellence. It's basically a 9-step system here, where what we're going to be doing is walking through these various steps within this, the next few minutes. Now, if we go in and look at step number 1, we start with the vision and mission. This describes basically who you are as an organization, what you're really trying to achieve, and what you want to achieve, and how you're going to achieve it. Not so much how you're going to achieve it, and what we're looking at, except for the overall vision, you know, on what we're actually going to be doing. So that's the high-level point of view. Now, I think a lot of times what happens is the way we have strategies handed down throughout the organization, those are more aligned to the vision. I want to be the best of the best. But I want to get to the point that strategies are defining what we actually do and more closely aligned to process improvement projects. So if you notice that strategy creation is step 5, not step 1 in this overall system. Now I'm going to be spending some time on step number 2. Since step number 2 is very important, this describes what you do and how you measure what you do. If you're a hospital, you do hospital things. If you build bridges, you have different processes that are aligned to building bridges. Fundamentally, organizations don't really change that much on what they do. They're going to have some sort of a core competency that they do. Notice I am not, again, and I want to reiterate it, I'm not leading from strategies. I'm leading from what you do and how you measure what you do. Now, the first thing that I'm showing right here is this describing what you're actually doing. So now you can look at this high-level step. You develop a product, you market a product, sell it, produce, deliver, invoice, and collect payment. Very high level. Your organization chart is subordinate to your value chain. Your organization chart can change, but your value chain should fundamentally stay relatively stable. Then what we can do, we can add like voice of the customer in the front end and also add report financials as the last step. Notice how I'm going in and including reporting of financials. So to me, that's very important. Often what happens is organizations create strategies that are not aligned to the financials. I was giving a session down in South America to an executive team, and I was describing the process that I'll be sharing with you later today on how to build strategies. And one of the managers pointed out, he said, we just put together our strategic statement, and it was aligned to our vision and mission. It was not aligned to the financials. And I think the way he was describing it is the way this is typically done. But I would like to create a strategy that's structurally aligned to the financials and how we want to improve it or maintain where we're at. To me, this makes a lot more sense. Now, in addition to the main flow that we have in our value chain, we also can have other support areas. So we've got safety and environment, legal, finance, IT, labor relationships. Those are very important functions, but that's not primarily what we do. So we want to figure out the main stream of what we're doing would be these particular functions. Now, each of those functions has the drill downs. So if I go in and click on this, and I'm going to be showing you how this could be all clickable later, is that I would get to the actual procedures for what I actually do. So if we were to click on this particular aspect in a value chain, you could have your flow chart that you have, and you can actually have drill downs. You can have BPMN, which is often used in the automation of processes. That's fine too. You can also have a value stream map too. You can have documentations attached to it. So this can become a repository for all your procedures. In our previous dialogue, we talked about voice of the customer. If you would click on voice of the customer, for example, then you might get various swim lanes. Notice what I have: complaints, audits, surveys, internal surveys, data warehousing. What I'm really trying to do, if you start examining what I'm actually looking at these as a process here, I'm really trying to get information into my data warehouse that I can start analyzing it. So I had commented at the break also about big data, because big data is great. You can have all this information, but what are you going to do with it? It can lead to a lot of firefighting. I want to create a structural system so I can systematically analyze it, and I can use statistical methods to help me figure out where I should focus my efforts on improvement. Now what we want to do next is align this to the, our metrics. So you notice these are our functions that we're doing, and we're aligning our metrics to what we want to, or how we want to measure each of these functions. Now, when we're determining what metrics we're going to use for each of the functions, we look at what are good metrics relative to quality, cost, and time. So if you look at produce and deliver products, we can say lead time, defective rates here, work in process, WIP, on-time delivery, and theory constraints throughput, a financial metric. So those are the metrics we came up with. Now, I'd venture to say your organization, value chain, may not be that much different than this one. A hospital is not this much different than this one. This one might sound initially like manufacturing, but it doesn't have to be. We put together a value chain for, like, it's called Big Brothers and Big Sisters. It's for single parents that would like to have their children, if it's a single mother, have a male figure work with the child. And so this was a nonprofit organization. So we helped them build a value chain for this. So we've built a value chain here for a major defense contractor that does software, done from a mining company down in South America. So this can apply to lots of organizations, basically. But a lot of times the structure is not that much different than what I've got listed here. Can everybody see how they might be able to create a value chain for their organization? Is there any questions? See, what I'm really trying to do here is align the what you do, that's the functions, with how you measure what you do. But often what happens in organization, the people that are working on scorecards are in the north wing of the building. The people that are working on process improvement are in the south wing of the building, and they don't talk to each other. Okay? And so that's what we want to do, is create a system to get around that. So now we're linking our processes to the overall response on how we measure the output of the process. Okay? As everyone's seen information presented, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at how we're going to measure and report out those particular metrics. So as I said, each one of these metrics need to get reported out. Lead time, defective rates, WIP, and so on. So we're going to be talking about now, for the next several minutes here, how we're actually going to report out that information. Okay? And I'm going to suggest there's maybe a better way than what has traditionally been done. So have you seen information presented in this form, man? Table of numbers? I think everybody has, right? That's fair? Well, if we look at this, we'll look at maybe annually, particular numbers here, and these are performance measures. Notice here, I'm also making references to that Volume 2 book that you'll be getting in the next few weeks. Okay? And so now you could go in and look at that particular table. I'll have more discussion about this particular topic. And you'll see my references to this form of reporting throughout the presentation. So if something happened in June, say that there was an improvement, would we know it? Not from that table, right.
Take the data by month, then we know.
Maybe taking it by month, he's talking about. So, but even if we take it by month, we could have a table of numbers, and it still could be difficult to tell.
We can make a graph.
We could make a graph, and now you're leading to what I'm going to be suggesting, that we need to look at the data differently. But even a graph may not tell us either. So I'm really going to be leading to a particular type of graph. Okay? Good point. But if somebody's presenting information like this, and this is how it's often presented at the executive level, what are we going to invariably get? We're basically going to get stories. So, for example, for the third line down here, someone might say, our costs per call are up in 2002 because we expected more annexations to this city. Annexations did not happen as quickly as we thought they would, so therefore our cost per call is up. Now the next year though, in 2003, the costs per call are down because we had more annexations. Can't you hear someone presenting, reporting out a particular table of numbers like this, giving you a story? Invariably, whenever somebody's presenting information in a PowerPoint slide, like a table of numbers, they're going to describe the ups and downs that are occurring. I'm suggesting that's not the best way of presenting information. It's like driving a car looking only at the rear view mirror. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have in the next 4 slides, I'm going to present data in a different way, and I'm going to use a sales process. Now I'm going to be comparing 5 salespeople, but I want to relate to this, to your particular situation. Instead of comparing 5 salespeople, what else might I compare? 5 departments, right? 5 different locations, 5 different products. So instead of using the word salespeople, I would like for everyone to go in and put a particular factor that they would like to compare, or they might compare in their work environment. So can everybody relate to, instead of 5 salespeople, what they might compare in their organization? Is there anybody not have or confused or understand what I'm asking? Okay, well, I'll assume that that's true. So we're going to, how might you present this out? You could create a pie chart, right? So now I have the 5 different salespeople. So what might we conclude from this particular pie chart, where bigger numbers are better? Maybe they're similar, could be similar. It might have, 5 might be a little bigger, right? It might be a little bit bigger. That's how, it may not be relevant. It may not be significant. But do you know from just looking at the chart whether it's significant or not? It's hard to tell, right? But you've had information presented like this to you, perhaps in a pie chart, but it can be confusing. I'm taking the same set of data, looking at it differently. Now we're looking at over time. What might you conclude now? It's got ups and downs. Some people may have said it looks like it could be a trend, right? Maybe it's hard to see, but there might be. It's confusing, right? So different people can get different opinions about this, right? But now we're looking at the 5 salespeople, but over time with the 5 salespeople. What about this? This is the same set of data presented differently. Gets confusing. It looks like maybe now we might say maybe month number 9 is not as high as the other ones. Notice we're getting very different conclusions from this. And it depends upon which chart somebody prefers on looking at the data with and how they interpret it. Let's look at several years. We could present it this form too. Now your eyes are going to be drawn and start comparing year to year and different months because somebody presented, because they like this particular form of charting, and now that's how going to be drawing conclusions from this. So what I'm suggesting, I would like to have more of a consistent way of doing it, way of looking at data. This is the red, yellow, green scorecard. This is a real scorecard. I did not fabricate the data. Management likes this chart because then they can look at the latest, most recent set of time and determine which metrics are not meeting their objectives. This is like measurement by objectives. Have people seen this farmer reporting before? Have you? Okay. But is that the best way of doing it? Is that a good way of actually reporting it? Here's another way of looking at the same type of data. It's a little fancier. The other one's like an Excel spreadsheet. You're looking at instantaneous performance relative to a goal. Can that have problems? Well, maybe you'd say, well, why is that problems? I mean, we're setting goals. People ought to go in and try to meet their objectives. But is that the right thing to do? It really doesn't give you any insight to the historical performance, does it? Just taking a snapshot of what's happening now. Also, if you don't have a specification, what are you going to be doing? Another one's the balanced scorecard. I'm suggesting this has some issues too. It's leading from strategies and visions, where strategies are often worded, I want to be the best of the best. It's got a balance around here, but what you're going to be trying to achieve is objectives, measures, targets, and initiatives. This is what I pulled from the internet on what they did for the balanced scorecard. So they now look at and track over time, or in different ways, of how we're actually trying to, or how we're performing relative to key areas of the business. And if it's red, we're not doing so good. We need to do something differently. So that's another way of managing throughout the organization. So just as this is a summary of the type of charting that I've illustrated here. Have you encountered other kinds of charts? What other kind? Contour charts.
Which gives you also an idea about the special events, special variation, and also somehow to see if the process is stable.
Yeah, so now he's looking at contour charts. Okay, other ones? Okay, so what I'm really trying to do is get a consistent way of reporting throughout the organization. Because I'm suggesting is that if one person reports it one way and another person reports it another way, you can get very different activities or very different behaviors from this. If we look at the metrics that we just talked about, they're typically based on fiscal year. And we have the table of numbers, you're looking at fiscal year. They're also unrelated and related to improvement systems. It's I want to set objectives out, measuring how we're doing, and I'm really not aligning this to process improvement efforts. You know, also, we tend to make point-to-point comparisons. We might compare this quarter to last quarter, or this quarter this year to a previous year of the same quarter. We typically don't look at Y as a function of X. That is, the output of the process Y is a function of the inputs of the process and the process steps itself. Understanding if we don't like Y, we need to change either the X's or the process steps itself. If we tend to manage to the Y's, you know what's that called? It's called management by hope. and we don't want to have management by hope. Okay? So what we like to have is effective metrics. We want to view the enterprise as a system of processes. Notice how this is consistent with a philosophy of business process management, or BPM. We would really like to manage to the process, understanding that the output or the financials is a result of how well we did with the process. But we often tend to manage to the whys, as I mentioned. But now I'm suggesting we really want to manage to the process. We also want to include variability within the statements. Often what happens is we're looking at a data point for a given month and trying to make a decision what we should react to. It doesn't talk about the variability of our process. Notice when I'm talking about metrics here, I'm talking about throughout the organization. I'm talking about from the line operator to the CEO. I'm suggesting they're basically all going to look at data the same way. That's what I think is very important. And I'm suggesting even the CEO should understand that there's variability. And I don't want to react to all the ups and downs as though they're special cause when they're maybe more often than not common cause. And we'll get into that later. Also what I want to do is I want to align metrics with an ongoing system of process improvement. So the idea is if we don't like the metrics, then we need to make improvements. Notice how that is very different than traditional Lean Six Sigma, where those projects are typically taken on so they want to go in and improve, have an ROI on the investment. There's nothing wrong with that, that's what you'd like to have, but I would like to look at it differently. I would like to figure out which metrics I want to improve in the overall organization, and if those metrics are very key to help my overall financials, then I want to have that metric improvement need pull for the project that's going to really impact that improvement, that metric. See how that's very different than traditional Six Sigma. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to examine how we can create effective metrics. I'm going to take one of the particular metrics that was listed in the scorecard that we had, the red, yellow, green scorecard. And I'll examine that in further detail. If we went in and looked at that particular metric, we'd notice that we have 33% red and 50% green. Now the question is that special or common cause variability? Now, for those that have taken statistical process control, you might be familiar with, or you should be familiar with, common and special cause variability. And I'm going to use an example that talks about it, because not everybody's familiar with it. But it's very important that everybody understands this particular point. I want to reiterate, if I'm saying something that's not real clear to you, I'd appreciate and I'd ask you to ask me a question and stop me, because I'm going to be presenting this information and it's going to be challenging some of the things that maybe you heard in SBC 101 or even how you've looked at metrics in the past. It's not difficult, but it's different on how you're looking at it. So let's look at common cause and special cause variability. It's very important to understand this, because the behavior that you have for a given process, if you've got special cause conditions, is very different than if you've got common cause conditions and you don't like the answer. So we're going to use an illustration to describe the difference between common and special cause variability. So we're going to look at the time it takes you to commute from home to work. And we're going to use an example of an automobile that you're going to commute from home to work. Similarly, you could have a train or or other means of transportation. But we're going to use an automobile for the purpose of illustration. Now ask the question, is it going to take you the same amount of time to the second every day? No. Why? External factors. Different things. For example, you could have more delays at stop. You could have more delays at the traffic light.
Yeah. And your capacity of driving could be different. I don't know. You could be tired, or you could be.
Yes, you could be more tired, so you're driving faster one day than the other day.
Yeah.
Okay.
The traffic.
The traffic could be different, right?
Yeah.
So these are the X's. So those X's can affect the overall amount of time it takes you to actually commute. So let's consider it takes us 25 to 35 minutes to commute. So this would be considered common cause variability. When we have common cause variability, we have actually no right to say, why did it take us a little bit longer one day than the other day? It'll drive you crazy. Because it's common cause variability. It's the normal variability of our process. Now, if it took us an hour one day, we can talk about that particular situation. Maybe there was inclement weather or a major traffic accident. We can talk about that situation. Let's consider we want to reduce the time it takes us to commute. So we want to establish a goal to be less than 32 minutes. So if it's 33 minutes, we didn't meet our goal. We want to try to understand what created the problem. If it's 31 minutes, thumbs up. We met our goal. But I just said that if we had common cause variability, we shouldn't be talking about it. But that's exactly what happens in red, yellow, green scorecards. We set out a goal. We don't know if it's common cause or special cause variability. We just set out a goal, and if we don't meet it, then we try to figure out what the problem was. And that can lead to a lot of firefighting. We're treating common cause variability as though it's special cause. There could be a lot of organizational waste when you're looking at data in this particular fashion. Let's consider now that we want to reduce the time it takes us to commute, but we're going to look at what we might do differently to our process. Let's consider that we decided to leave a half an hour earlier. We went to work, did an experiment, and notice now it takes us between 18 minutes to 22 minutes. So we not only reduced the average commute time, but also we reduced the variability because we changed our process and we made an improvement. So if we've got common cause variability, we need to change our process. If we've got special cause variability, then we need to talk about those particular situations and then maybe figure out what we could do different to our process. Does everybody understand that? That's very important. Now, what I'm going to be, for those that are people that are familiar with control charting, I'm going to be using that particular tool to identify if I got special or common cause variability. However, this is a very important however, it's not the same approach as you would use in traditional control charting, which is more often than not done in manufacturing. With traditional control chart, we're trying to identify when a special cause occurs, stop the presses, and fix the problem. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get a 30,000-foot level view of how we're performing, like an airplane. We're trying to get a high-level view of the process output. So we don't want to react to all the ups and downs of the terrain. That's the X's that might have the variability associated with it. Now, traditional control charts, we're going to take this same set of data that we had for this particular red, yellow, green scorecard, and we're going to examine it differently. Because the other things that this red, yellow, green scorecard or stoplight scorecard doesn't give us is an estimated what we can expect in the future. So now we're going to take that data and we're going to create an individual's control chart. Now, the mathematics of an individual's control chart is not very difficult. I'm not going to really get into it particular session today, but the variability that we have between these adjacent points affect our control limits. So those are mathematically determined by the variability of our process. So if we've got a lot of variability, what's going to happen in our control limits? They're going to get wider, right? If we got less variability, they're going to get narrower. Notice it makes no statement relative to what we want. All we're trying to determine if we've got a consistent process. In other words, the 25 to 35 minutes, that was our common cause variability. That's the variability we expect. So in this particular case, we notice, since there's no trends relative to the control limits, that we thought we made an improvement from here to here, because it went red to green. But in reality, we didn't. It was common cause variability. Notice how this can completely drive the different behaviors. Anybody have any questions on this? Yes?
Supposing that we are tracking monthly the performance for one indicator, and we are at the beginning of the year, we are in the February months, so we only have two observations, two data. It will be the same, the graph, or it will be a larger variation showing?
Okay, he made this, he was talking about if we only had 2 months in the year. I'm glad you brought that up, because what I'm suggesting is we don't start over at the beginning of the year. We're running continual process, because processes don't go in and magically start changing at the first of the year. Now, we may have some seasonality associated with that, and we could address that separately. We may have the holiday season we have to look at differently than the rest of the year, but that's a separate question. So right now, we're not bounded by calendar year, because processes are not bounded by calendar year. So, but that's a very good point. And we want to make sure that that's the way we look at the data. Now, whenever I go into organizations, they tend to look at things by quarter and by year, and they want to go in and break this charts by quarter and by year. And I've said, no, you shouldn't do that. You really want to look at the overall system, understanding that some quarters are going to be up and some quarters are going to be down because of this common cause variability. Everybody in the organization needs to get it in their hearts, the difference between common and special cause variability. And that sounds trivial, but that's a hard habit to break. Okay? Any other questions? I appreciate the question. Yes?
Să înțeleg că atunci când ne uităm la aceste raportări, focusul să fie nu atât pe valoarea cifrei și dacă e roșu, verde sau galben, cât pe faptul că se încadrează într-o normalitate și că este ok, sau este ceva ieșit din tipare și atunci înseamnă că s-a întâmplat o variabilă specială, ceva special s-a întâmplat și să analizăm problema aceasta. Fie că e pe verde, fie că e pe roșu. Deci eu înțeleg din ce mi-ați spus că citirea acestor cifre nu reprezintă nimic dacă ne uităm strict la codul de culoare, ci că trebuie să corelăm codul de culoare cu cauzalitatea de normalitate sau de specialitate care a determinat codul de culoare, că acolo e de fapt esența analizei. Suntem unde suntem pentru că suntem într-un context normal sau suntem unde suntem pentru că s-a întâmplat ceva? Acolo e elementul de decizie, că cifra e cifră și oricum e istorie, s-a întâmplat, nu mai avem ce să mai facem. Interpretez corect?
Okay. One of the things that I want to make perfectly clear, what I'm suggesting, I'm not done with my overall opinion here, but I'm not going to use the red, yellow, green at all. I'm suggesting you don't, except later I'm going to present how you could introduce red, yellow, green, but it's completely different than this. All I'm right now is I'm saying that we thought the process changed between red and green, and it didn't. It was common cause variability. Notice I did not say we didn't have a problem. But what I'm alluding to, and I'll be showing you, we've got a common cause problem, not a special cause problem. Okay, so if we got a common cause problem, we have to do a process improvement effort, change our process to actually make it better. And the proof that we made it better is that this chart would transition to a new level of performance. Okay? So now, for one thing, we didn't improve it. But the other thing, though, by charting it this way, we can say our process is predictable. So if you have a recent region of stability, you can use that data to go in and make a prediction statement. Notice what I just implied is that we can start looking out the windshield of the car. The next obvious question is, what do you predict? So if we look at our data over time, and then now we consider that to be a random sample of the future, we can then build a distribution of what we expect to see in the future. We can then turn that distribution on its side. We now can put our spec on it, or our red criteria trigger, which was 2.2. So the area under the curve to the left of that represents the frequency that we had expected to be read, not only now, but in the future. Now, the problem with getting this area calculation, you'll have some issues with normality. It's not a bell-shaped curve. Sometimes, especially in transactional processes, it can be log normal. A better way of doing this, and it's different, but a much better way of doing it, is using a probability plot. Okay, now that could be new to some people. Even the people that took Six Sigma training, often they used this to test normality, and if it was not normal, they went into cold sweats. They got nervous about it. What am I going to do now? You know, but it's really not a big issue at all. You might do a better fit by looking at the data, using a log normal probability plot. But the point is that you can get the same and better information from this probability plot. So if we plot this on a particular probability plot and the data follows a straight line and it's a normal probability plot, we believe it's from the bell-shaped normal distribution, or we don't have any reason to believe it's not. We then put the value of 2.2. Well, first off, notice how the x-axis for both the histogram and also the probability plot, they have basically the same units associated with it. The y-axis represents percent less than. So the way you use this chart is you could go 2.2 up and you look at 32.6. So what that represents is the area to the left of 2.2. So basically we conclude that the process from the previous chart didn't change, and now we're saying it's got about a 32.6% problem. In other words, roughly 1 out of every 3 times in the future, we would expect it to be red. We've got a common cause problem, not the special cause problems as the red, yellow, green scorecards would have indicated that we had. This is a very important point. Does anybody have any questions about this? I want to make sure everybody understands this crystal clear, because if you don't, you're going to be lost. Yes, appreciate it. He's got a question.
From my perspective, this looks like we have quite a standard business, mature market probably, and we can predict what is happening. What can we tell about dynamic business that is growing 100% year over year, even more than that, opening new markets and stuff like that? Can we predict something?
Okay, what I have is, let's say, I got it in the book, is that I talk about year-over-year growth. So what you would do is look at it a little differently. If you're talking about the overall performance, far as your financials. And I got a way, I call that the satellite level metrics. This is called 30,000 satellite or financials. So basically what you're looking at is, because I would expect that you might have some seasonality a little bit to it. Maybe November is different than the other ones, or at least in general. So what you basically do is look at the compare February to February, that growth compared to the previous February to February, and then you're analyzing the year-over-year growth. So we want to see if our year-over-year growth is stable. But getting down to the 30,000 foot level, I would venture to say, I'm not sure what business you're talking about, but you might have returns, defective rates and things like that, or you might have on-time deliveries. So even though you're growing the business, those particular processes, the output of those processes should be evaluated, because or customer complaints and things like that. So those are not really so much a function of the year-over-year growth. Those are, hey, how you're looking at the data for the individual processes. And how well you're doing for on-time delivery and defective rates could affect your year-over-year growth and also your profitability. Now, the other thing that you could look at is the profit margins. So now we want to look at monthly profit margins, because you could have year-over-year growth that's 100%, but the thing is you could be losing money. So we want to have year-over-year growth that's 100%, but we also would like to have 20% profit margins too, or whatever you want to have, and I want to see if they're stable. And then if you're looking at the profit margins, then what you want to do later is say, well, I'd like to increase those. Those might be leading to projects that's dealing with return rates. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I wanted to kind of answer your questions. Did that help? Okay, good. Well, if you got any questions later, don't hesitate. Any other questions? Yes.
Because many of them maybe didn't see till now this kind of graph.
Ok, pentru cei care până acum au lucrat doar în Excel, poate cele două grafice care vă sunt aici expuse nu vă sunt atât de familiare. Tipul ăsta de grafic. Am dreptate sau nu? Vă sunt familiare? Pentru că ele N-am înțeles. Da, corect. Bine, acestea, în speță, acestea sunt obținute într-un soft care se cheamă Minitab. Nu știu dacă ați auzit de el. Este un soft dedicat calculului statistic. Sigur, nu este obligatoriu să-l aveți. Există multe add-on-uri și în Microsoft Excel care vă pot da același tip de grafic care se referă la normalitatea unei populații de date, comportamentul ei statistic. Și iarăși, nu știu dacă a fost foarte clar pentru multă lume ce înseamnă Y egal cu F de X1, X2, X3 ca reprezentarea unui proces. Este clar pentru toată lumea sau nu? Y-ul reprezentând livrabilul acelui proces, output-ul acelui proces. Aș vrea, scuze dacă știți deja foarte bine aceste lucruri, dar aș vrea ca ele să fie foarte clare. Dacă vreți un exemplu, Y-ul, dacă este o cafea bună, care ar fi X și acestui Y? Ingredientele, exact. Poate locația, Marriott să fie primul... Nu? Exact. Deci, aceasta este ideea. Să aveți în minte, în momentul când vorbiți de un Y, livrabilul acelui proces, ceea ce procesul livrează, iar X și sunt toate elementele care concură la un Y așteptat și plătit de un client. Este clar?
Okay. No, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to take this example, and now we're going to present it in a format that others could better understand and relate to their overall process. Now notice when we're putting this information in this format, it's really two different graphs. So we're really looking at, is the process stable, and then also put together our prediction statement. Now notice this is consistent with Deming's approach, or Deming's thought about we should include variability within the overall statements relative to what we have for the overall process. Because the probability plot inclusion talks about variability, or it's got variability buried within its overall chart. Now what we like to do is present information in lieu of the red, yellow, green scorecard. We would like to present it in a format that everybody understands. So we're going to go in and say, because the process is stable here, and then we take that data and put a probability plot, we now can put a statement underneath it in terms that everybody understands. So now the process is stable and it's got a 32.6% nonconformance rate. So the line operator can understand statements like that, and also the CEO can understand statements like that. Also, for those that have taken Lean Six Sigma training, the way you would typically present how the process is performing is using CP, CPK, PP, and PPK. Those are called process capability indices. But those are a lot more difficult to understand, and also they can be very much a function of how you actually sampled from the overall process. Where this approach I'm suggesting here is going to be a consistent way whenever because I'll put together some rules for creating this particular form of reporting. So what we have now instead, we've got some software that could be put, these are macros that can sit on top of Minitab statistical software. So it's basically taking this chart and putting this statement at the bottom here. So everybody can easily understand how this process is performing. Now understand now, if this process is not giving the desired results relative to what you're really looking to accomplish, then you need to do a process improvement project. You need to change the process so that you're going to make it better. You need to change the ingredients to the coffee, or you need to change the temperature, or the some sort of another element that you might have when you're making your coffee. You need to change the time or that you depart from your home to work process that you're commuting to work. Does everybody understand that? That's a very important point. If, for example, you're talking about the year-over-year growth, and now he's looking at you're looking at on-time delivery. Maybe that's a driver for his company that has 100% year-over-year growth. You say, well, if I don't do a better job on my on-time delivery, well, then I could be losing my market share. So that could be a project. But this would show how you're performing relative to on-time delivery. Very important that you understand this, because we're going to be hitting this a lot of different ways. So let's go in now, look at the red, yellow, green scorecards. And also the other way we could present information. So we presented this sales data, and this is 4 different charts. What I'm suggesting is that instead of those 4 different charts, we would present the information in this format. What we're basically looking at now is an individual's chart of the average value that we have from revenue for each of the 5 salespeople for the month, and also the variability that we have between those. So now we have 5 samples per each subgroup, or each time increment. And we're going to look at the average sales revenue for each one of those by month, and also the variability. But notice the average value is stable, and also the variability is stable too. So therefore we say we've got a stable process. So we've got 2 different aspects we're looking at, the average and also the variability. Now since they're stable, we go in and do a probability plot of the raw data. Now in this particular case, we don't have a specification. Before we had a specification of 2.2. If it was less than 2.2 is red. Now we don't have a specification. If we don't have a specification, then what I like to do is pick off the 10, 50, and 90 percentiles. And then we bring that over and down. We read the value here. We then automatically make a statement here. The process is predictable. The estimated median, the 50% value, is this. And 80% of the time it's between 2978 and 11,000. Or 29,000 to 114,000, excuse me. Now I'm not saying we necessarily like that answer, but that's the way life is. Any questions about that? I just threw another curve at you. Yes?
You mentioned that the process is predictable, meaning that the process is stable. How about if the process is not predictable? How is the report looking like? What I should write down there?
The process may not be predictable for several reasons. One of them, you might have a point that's up here. So if you have that particular point, you want to investigate that. Figure out what happened there. But what I really am trying to avoid is having people say, why is this average high and that average low? That's common cause variability. If you present information using this 30,000 foot level approach, you're going to find out more processes are stable that you originally thought that were not stable. For those that have taken statistical process control or Lean Six Sigma training, you would use an X-bar R chart. I'm suggesting X-bar and R charts have some issues. I don't have time to get into it here. My book talks about that. But I'm using an individual's chart, so the variability between the subgroups affects the control limits. That's very important. So I can discuss that more in detail offline if anybody's interested in it. But I don't want to add a lot of confusion with this audience here. That's all described in the books and articles and so on. But I'm using an individual's chart, so it's taking a high level, 30,000 foot level perspective. Now there's other situations where it may be a special cause. So for example, if the average value, in this particular case, we want to have higher numbers. So if the average value starts creeping up here, then we stage it. And I'll be showing that in a minute because our process changed.
Thank you.
Good. Appreciate, again, the questions here. But if we went in and started analyzing the data, we want to start looking for the X's that drive this Y. Because we like to have more revenue, right? Okay, so what might we think that the revenue could be different between? We got 5 salespeople. Do you think that they might have some differences? Right? So what we could do is present the data in a different form. So if we look at this particular form, and we can do some statistics on it also, what we'd find is salesperson 5 is generating more revenue. Okay? Well, that's interesting to know. This could be like department number 5 is doing better, or we might have one person on the call center is not doing as good a job as somebody else. So then they need to have some coaching. We're really trying to focus on not beating up people, but trying to improve the processes so they do a better job. So let's consider now we went in and evaluated and determined what that particular salesperson was doing. We then went in and helped the other people to follow the similar process to the person that had been doing the best. We then noticed that the average value shifted. So now it's staged. The variability looks like it could have even gone down, okay, between the salespeople. So now we have another recent region of stability, and we could go in and do a probability plot of these values here, not all of them. We're doing that, and we notice now the median is 103,046, and 80% of the time it's between here and here. So we reduced or improved the overall average, and we reduced the variability between salespeople. So if we do a dot plot of this particular situation, this is what we notice is now salesperson 5 is doing something similar to the other people. So we made an improvement to our process. It was not unlike that we left a half an hour earlier when we were doing our home to commute process. We changed one of the X's. This could be, as Wisconsin was talking about here, we changed an ingredient to make better coffee. We changed an X value, and now it made a difference. We went in and did something different to our process, so now our on-time delivery is better. Okay? So any questions on that? So let's look at comparison of these 2 different approaches for charting. Traditional approaches, you had a variety of ways of presenting information. With this approach, it was very consistent because you didn't really see and notice here that, hey, all of a sudden there was a change in the process. You didn't notice that. So do you see the differences in the different charting methodologies? Okay? Oops. So this is the way I would like to present the information. So in other words, we don't use red, yellow, green scorecards for the Y values. We don't go in and do pie charts, line charts, bar charts, other multiple year bar charts. We're actually looking at seeing if our process is stable. And now we're making a statement of how we're actually performing. We're making a statement so that people in the operator level and the executive level can basically understand at a glance how we're performing. Okay? So this is a very important and very different way of presenting information. Any questions on it? Yes.
I have a question.
Okay, good.
This type of scorecarding looks like more complicated. Your customer, how did they react to this level of knowledge that somebody should have? I mean, for the top level, okay, they can be learned. But for the lower level, operators or, I don't know, sales agents, is this feasible for them to understand from your experience?
No, okay. I think it's very feasible because it's just different. And once you have people start grasping this, it really gets exciting because right now, notice here, the only statement that they need to read is this one here. In this case, the median is 103, and 80% of the time it's between here and here. And then, but what I really think it's important, even at the C level, is to go in and have it so that people are not reacting to why this one's low and that's one high. And that happens all the time in red, yellow, green scorecards. And we think we made an improvement and we didn't. It's the wrong thing to do. It's, if Deming went in and had, many years ago, had a red, yellow, green, not red, yellow, had the red bead experiment. And what he did was take a paddle, and in this you had a bunch of bead colors. And he goes in and had people pull out this, and then they count the number of reds, which reds were bad. Okay? And what he would do then is if it didn't meet a certain level, he'd beat up on the people. Why didn't you go in and get this goal that I sent? And then you did a paddle down here again, and you brought it up, and it was okay. Great job. This guy over here didn't do so good. And it was all by chance. And that's what red, yellow, green scorecards are more often than not. They're common cause variability, and reacting to those are special cause. And so, and when you present this information, it's different, is all you have to do is putting this down here. Now, the people that are actually creating the scorecards, that you have to have some more training. We got online training to do that. It's part of our black belt and master black belt training too. That's a little bit of complexity to it. And also, what you actually figure out what you're going to measure within the overall value chain is very critical too, on how you're doing that and how you're putting all that together. But once you get to this point, people just love it. We went in and had someone, she was from Germany, okay, and she attended our master black belt training. She was a statistician. And I described 30,000 foot level reporting to her. She went in, she said, was so excited she couldn't sleep that night, is that because she said, I knew my processes were not out of control, and that she changed this form of reporting throughout the organization. And what I'm suggesting here is this is the way you need to do it throughout the organization, not just for manufacturing. And it completely changed the behaviors. Did it for a mining company down in South America. And we're getting ahead of myself a little bit. I'm showing you the value chain where you can click through it. We had their procedures. The behavior of the media completely changed in that the mining manager said, gee whiz, maybe I'm the bottleneck, and now I need to do a lean project to reduce the maintenance time on these trucks that's transporting the ore out of the ground. And that's a good thing. So you'll have it here, whereas more often than not, we're trying to look at the bar charts, what's the problems of the day, and that can lead to firefighting. And what I'm really suggesting more often than not, it's common cause variability. In order to prove that metric long term, we need to do a process improvement project. We need to do something fundamentally different. And it completely changes the behavior in the organization. And it's a lot easier to do too. But it's just different, you know.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
I have one.
Sure.
Do you have by any chance a partnership with IBM? Because this looks like exactly SPSS, which is our product for predictive analytics.
No, I don't, but I'm not sure you have the probability plots too? Yeah. Like that? Because we haven't, because I've seen more as Cognoses that they have the red, yellow, green scorecards. That's what they, more often than not. Now, there was a person down in Austin that was showing something on control charting in one of the presentations. I've had dialogue with him, but he's really been focusing more on the control chart and not doing probability plots as part of this. This is very unique in that we have it aligned with
well, we do it mini-tab, you could do it other things, but it actually puts this chart here. And what I'm suggesting, you don't have red, yellow, green scorecards. And this is the way you ought to be doing it, and this is leading the project. But now what we need to do is line this to an overall value chain. And that's what we're going to be getting into, because this is just an individual on how you look at metrics. And you really basically get rid of all this farmer reporting. Okay? But I think that there's some real opportunities. I just have not seen it within IBM that they're doing it, and this is what they're actually promoting.
At the core of the predictive analytics and modeling within SPSS, and we are plotting a lot of this kind of...
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to see that with you. I'd be interested to see what you got there. Be interested to see what you got there. So what we really want to do now is link those metrics to your value chain. Because does metrics by themselves help anything? Well, not really, because what we really need to do is look at how they're linked to what we actually do. So what we're looking at right now, what we want to have is a system so that we're clicking on this and it leads to this particular scorecard. So it's readily available by everybody. Okay? And notice this is how we tie also business process management in here too, because now what we want to do is having the value chain is so now everybody has a quick view of how their process is performing. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a high level, and I was thinking I have a flip chart, but a value chain for a hospital. Okay, so this is going to be yeah. So let's go in and so what we're going to do now is look at the how we're creating the overall data. Let's see, that's a better way of doing this one. So what in a hospital might you do first? So I'm creating the boxes here. So you can look at here. So don't you think it would be a good idea to maybe get customer satisfaction? Isn't that a good thing to start out with on the left side of what you do? No. Oh, yeah, okay, good. Thanks. So take a piece of paper here. So what I'm going to do is I want to create, make sure everybody understands what I'm talking about here. What I want to do is I want to create something like this for a hospital. So don't you think we might have something that's not that much different? Voice of the customer, develop product, market product, sell product, produce and deliver service, invoice and collect, report financials. Do you think that that might not be much different than what you would have in a hospital? You don't think it would be the same? It would be similar? Yeah. Okay. What I'd like for you to do now is, I've gone in and listed some metrics here for a particular situation here, and I'd like for you to go in your tables, pick one of the particular metrics, and think what particular metrics you might have for that, for the hospital, produce and deliver. Maybe it's going to look very similar to this. I don't know, but I want you to think about how you're going to measure this. Now, if you would rather go in and pick a particular process that you have, that's fine with me, I don't care. But I would like for you to start thinking about how are you going to measure a particular function in an organization and what metrics you're going to come up with. So if you decide to go in and as a team here on each one of your tables, another function or within another organization, that's fine with me. It doesn't have to be a hospital. But I want to have you start thinking about what are we going to measure? What are we going to measure? And then we're going to get in later how we're reporting it. Okay? So we're going to take a few minutes here, and then lunch, I think I'm going to be up in 10 minutes here. So we'll take the next 10 minutes that you start putting together some of the, describe which function you're going to do and how you're going to measure that function. And again, you can choose whatever function you want to. If it's a hospital or any other organization, that's fine with me. Any questions? Okay. And then we'll discuss it after lunch.
Okay.
Bună ziua! Aici se închide această sesiune și înainte de a intra în pauză de prânz, aș vrea să fac niște anunțuri administrative. Primul lucru este, cei care aveți pe badge-uri bulina galbenă, veți lua prânzul în restaurantul Champions. Cei care aveți bulina albastră, o veți lua la Steakhouse, imediat în partea stângă. Sunt și două concursuri care sunt oferite de către partenerii noștri. Una este cea oferită de către Bonaventura. Este standul de cum ieșiți din această sală imediat în față, în dreapta, unde toți cei care veți merge și veți lăsa o carte de vizită veți câștiga garantat un premiu. Al doilea lucru este faptul că partenerul nostru Constantin Stan de la Scendis vrea să ofere și el două cadouri. Te rog să-mi spui despre ce este vorba.
De fapt sunt 4 cadouri.
4 cadouri. Dacă mai stăteam un pic, erau 8, nu?
Nu, da, se poate încerca, sigur. Deci, așa cum v-am spus și în prezentare, noi organizăm cursuri cu certificare internațională pentru diverse niveluri de certificare în Lean Six Sigma, în Business Process Management. Rugămintea ar fi să lăsați câte o carte de vizită aici pe masă, iar la sfârșitul zilei se vor face 4 extrageri. 2 pentru un curs gratuit de Lean Six Sigma, Green Belt, nivelul mediu de certificare, și 2 pentru un curs pe care îl demarăm cu partenerii americani de la Aura Portal, un curs pentru specialist în Business Process Management. Deci vor fi practic 2 vouchere gratuite pentru participarea la aceste cursuri, pe care fie câștigătorii le vor utiliza personal, fie le vor utiliza în cadrul companiilor pe care le conduc. Deci, cei interesați sunt rugați să lase câte o carte de vizită pe masa de aici, de la intrare. Mersi.
Al treilea este, aveți fiecare în mapa pe care ați găsit-o în mapa, acest chestionar de satisfacție. Rugămintea noastră la finalul evenimentului este să-l completați și să-l lăsați la colegii de la recepție. Se va extrage după eveniment, din cei care depun acest chestionar și sunt prezenți la degustarea de vinuri oferite de către cotnari de la finalul evenimentului, se vor extrage 3 excursii în Tenerife. Și acum că atâta vești bune, bănuiesc că aveți și poftă de mâncare, vă doresc poftă bună și ne vedem la ora 2, unde Forrest va continua următoarele 2 sesiuni. Poftă bună!